This video took 18 days to create, for a total of 28 minutes. Let's take a deep dive into the nature of money, how ordinary people can become wealthy, and even achieve a degree of financial freedom. I highly recommend you watch this video to the end. Have you ever wondered why you're so consistently poor? What's the real reason behind it? Feel free to drop your own reasons in the comments, and after watching the video, see if your perspective has changed. Today's topic is, what causes the conflict between the mindset of the rich and the mindset of ordinary people, and what should we do about it now? When you turn on the TV and flip to any dispute resolution show, you'll find that 90% of the conflicts are about money. For money, some people will abandon family and friends. Having money can give a person dignity and respect. Money is so important, yet most people don't understand it at all. You can ask yourself this: you spend, earn, or prepare to earn money every day. But do you truly understand it? What are the properties of money? How does currency actually work? Why can't you get rich? In the early days of human development, there was no money. People survived by exchanging goods for other goods. But this kind of exchange had major drawbacks. For example, if Farmer A wants to trade his axe for several different things, like eggs, cloth, and milk, how can he divide the axe into 3 parts to sell? Once an axe is divided, it loses its function. Another drawback is that if Farmer A wants to trade his axe for eggs, but the farmer with the eggs doesn't need an axe, the trade can't happen. Bartering suffered from 2 main problems: indivisibility and the lack of a double coincidence of wants. Through continuous trial and error, humans discovered that indirect exchange was the most efficient. A consensus slowly formed to select one commodity to act as currency. For example, cream had 2 key properties: it was divisible, and everyone needed it. So, Farmer A could first trade his axe for a certain amount of cream, and then use that cream to trade for eggs, cloth, and salt. But as trade increased, cream became even more marketable because, in addition to its general use, it also served as money. This created an excess demand for cream. In any society, the most marketable good is gradually selected as the medium of exchange. Once more and more people choose it as a medium, its demand increases even further, creating a virtuous cycle. We call all such goods money. Throughout history, many items have been used as money. There was tobacco in colonial Virginia, sugar in the West Indies, salt in Abyssinia, cattle in ancient Greece, nails in Scotland, copper in ancient Egypt, as well as ancient artifacts, tea, fish hooks, agate, and more. After several centuries of natural selection, gold and silver replaced other commodities to become the currencies in a free, competitive market. Compared to other commodities, gold and silver were more portable, divisible, and, due to their limited supply, could not be infinitely produced. Gold is only produced when a star explodes into a supernova. The total amount of gold on our planet is fixed, and its brilliant, shimmering color satisfies a natural human preference. The reason silver is cheaper than gold is that silver oxidizes; it turns black over time. Gold is an inert metal, meaning it rarely reacts with other elements. This means if you find a piece of gold now and make it into a big Billy TV award, 1,000 years from now, it will look almost exactly the same. The properties of gold give it a stable value. Stable value is incredibly important. For instance, the fiat currency we hold does not have a stable value. The purchasing power of paper money is guaranteed to shrink over time. Here, I want to share a very important concept: the difference between currency and money. Currency is a medium of exchange, a unit of account. It is portable, divisible, durable, and fungible. Fungible means that my dollar has the same purchasing power as your dollar. The only difference between money and currency is that money is a long-term store of value. This distinction between money and currency is something that even many professional accountants and financial planners don't know. So why is the distinction between money and currency important? Because most ordinary people store the compensation they receive from their labor in the form of currency. And the value of that currency was decoupled from the value of money back in 1973. In 1973, President Nixon decided to sever the link between the US dollar and gold. The reason for this was simple: the US no longer had enough gold to redeem the dollars held by other countries. You can't print gold. From that point on, the world began using currency instead of money. Currency is a medium that can be continuously printed and cannot store value. Why is it that you see the numbers in your bank account go up, but you don't actually feel richer? Because even though it looks like you have more money, the entire system you're in is constantly printing more of it. Because we hold currency, not money, it can be printed without limit. With massive printing, the amount of money in the market increases, and the value of your savings is slowly diluted and transferred away. You trade your freedom and time for economic energy, which is stored in the form of currency. Your wealth continuously shrinks, and thus, your freedom and time are further eroded. It's like having a hole in the bottom of your wealth bucket. If you don't find a way to plug it, it doesn't matter how long you save, you'll still have no money. This process of continuous devaluation is called inflation. Because of inflation, people who love to save become poorer and poorer. In fact, the speed at which global currency is issued is accelerating. I don't know if you're familiar with the subprime mortgage crisis. The subprime crisis was a financial storm that hit the United States in 2007. Let me first explain what subprime means. For example, if I have $2 million in assets and I take out a $500,000 loan to buy a house, I can easily pay it back. That is a prime loan. But if someone earns $3,000 a month, and unreliably at that, yet takes out a $1.5 million loan to buy a house, that's a subprime loan. To be precise, if a borrower's FICO credit score is below 600, it's called a subprime loan. The FICO score in the US ranges from 325 to 900. For borrowers with a score below 600, the default rate is 1 in 8. For those with a score between 700 and 800, the default rate is 1 in 123. And for those with a score above 800, the default rate is 1 in 1,292. In the year 2000, the US had just experienced a severe crash, the dot-com bubble burst. To recover from the losses, the US began cutting interest rates aggressively. These rate cuts affected the interest on all sorts of bonds and financial products. Naturally, everyone shifted their money to another place, real estate. The real estate market back then was like China's after 2000, housing prices soared. Because the real estate market was booming, most people believed there was no bubble. They thought property values would just keep climbing steadily. It wasn't just the public that thought this, even the banks did. So, the banks started a series of wild maneuvers. First, under pressure from the government, banks relaxed their loan review standards. At the most extreme, you could get a mortgage just by taking a picture. In the movie The Big Short, there's a character who puts his dog's name on a mortgage application, and the loan gets approved. The reality probably wasn't that exaggerated, but you get a sense of how loose the standards were. People could then take the house they bought with a loan and mortgage it back to the bank to apply for a loan for a second house. Then repeat the process for a third, fourth, and fifth house. At that time, a single stripper owned 5 houses. The leverage was terrifying. If prices kept rising, it was fine, it amplified gains. But if prices dipped even slightly, many people would be wiped out. Why did the banks dare to lend so recklessly? Because they believed the real estate market would remain hot indefinitely. If you couldn't repay your loan, it was simple. The bank would foreclose on your property and auction it off. The banks thought that in a market with constantly rising prices, they wouldn't just break even on an auction, they'd actually make a bigger profit. Later, the banks got greedier. They wanted to make money even faster. So, they bundled these mortgages together, rated them by credit score, and created tiered financial products, prime, alt-A, and subprime. This type of financial product is called an MBS, or mortgage-backed security. At the time, there were no other high-yield investment options. As soon as these hit the market, investment institutions and consumers bought them in droves. Why did everyone love them? Because they were mortgages. Nobody fails to pay their mortgage, right? Well, the final outcome proved them all wrong. Were the ratings on those mortgage-backed securities really accurate? No. The rating agencies were also in a competitive market. For example, if I create an MBS and go to a rating agency, and you give me a AAA rating, I'll do business with you. If you don't give me a AAA, I'll go to your competitor and put you out of business. After a while, these rating agencies, just to survive, had to turn a blind eye. So, those mortgage-backed securities were full of junk. As for the absolute worst subprime loans, they were so bad that nobody would buy them. So, they bundled these loans with something called a CDO. You can think of a CDO as insurance for subprime loans. This turned even the garbage into high-quality financial products. Many consumers had no idea what they were buying. They saw a high rating and just bought in blindly. So, this junk, mixed in with prime loans, was sold off together. Many other big banks bought a ton of it. In reality, when you deposit money in a bank, the bank takes the vast majority of it and invests it elsewhere. The deposit number you see in your account is just a number the bank wrote down for you. And just like that, the banks transferred their loan risk to all of society. Time flew by to 2007. Many subprime borrowers became unable to repay their loans. The first wave of bad debt appeared. At that time, US mortgage law had a clause stating that the bank could only seize the house you bought with the loan to repay the debt. They had no right to your other assets. It's not like it is today. This first wave of bad debt led to a large number of foreclosed homes hitting the market for auction. Suddenly, there was a surplus of houses, but the number of buyers remained the same. So, housing prices fell. Because of the sudden drop in US housing prices, many people who had just bought a home a few years prior discovered that their total loan amount was now more than the value of their house. For example, you took out a $1 million loan to buy a house, and now the house has dropped in value to only $600,000. At this point, the bank couldn't touch your other assets to make you pay. So, many rational people simply started to default on their mortgages intentionally. The second wave of bad debt appeared. Even more properties flooded the real estate market. The supply-demand balance was further disrupted, and prices fell again. At this point, the default rate slowly climbed from 4% to 8%, then 10% and beyond. Consequently, consumers who had bought the mortgage-backed financial products found they weren't getting paid. The MBS and CDOs collapsed because these products were highly dependent on mortgage payments. And then everyone realized the sky was falling. The especially awkward situation was that the bank, the lender, the bank's depositors, and the people who bought the MBS and CDOs all couldn't get their money. The market was in a state of total panic. The financial crisis had erupted. Everyone wanted to pull their money out. Because of this crisis, many banks failed, like Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns. In total, more than 30 banks failed in the initial period, and another 148 failed over the next 4 years. As banks collapsed one after another, the government could no longer sit back. And so, the next chapter in history was too big to fail. The government stepped in to rescue the market. Because if the government didn't act, the US economy would be completely finished. The US had many methods for the rescue, but one of the first was a series of interest rate cuts. When even continuous rate cuts weren't enough, they resorted to releasing more currency by purchasing government bonds, in other words, printing money. By continuously printing money and giving it to the places that desperately needed a bailout. This type of bank rescue is generally called quantitative easing, or QE. Between 2008 and 2012, the US launched 3 rounds of quantitative easing. This video was made in 2020, and by then, the US had already entered a phase of infinite QE, a term I just learned after binging Naruto's Infinite Tsukuyomi. At this point, you might be asking, what does the US printing money have to do with me? Actually, the US central bank printing money doesn't affect us immediately. It's a slow drip that takes 3 to 5 years to seep in. The world is a single, interconnected system. If there's too much water on one side, it's bound to flood over to the other. So, while it seems like it's happening an ocean away and has nothing to do with us, it will, in one way or another, affect our wallets. Our own country's currency is also steadily issued at a greater rate each year. And in 2008, 2012, and 2015, our central bank also engaged in massive issuances. This was the famous 4 trillion yuan stimulus plan that we all know about. After all this, I'm still stressing one concept. If we store our wealth in the form of currency, we can only watch it devalue. Currency is just paper that represents purchasing power. And this currency will devalue even further due to global quantitative easing. Over the last 20 years, the inflation rate in our country has been about 7%. If you have $1 million and you leave it in the bank, your money shrinks by 6.65% every year. That's a loss of 66,000. If you put it in a money market fund like Yuebao, your money depreciates by 58,000 a year. Living in an age of depreciating money, you'd be better off spending it all now than saving it, because at least the money you spend has preserved its purchasing power. In the next section, let's talk about what the rich do and how inflation actually works. If you suddenly had 100 billion out of thin air, and you spend it all within a week, what would happen to the market? If 100 billion suddenly enters the market, who benefits and who loses? The new 100 billion you spend in a short time will systematically ripple through the market. As the new money spreads, it will drive up prices, diluting the purchasing power of every single dollar. This dilution is not equal. The first money you spend creates the first wave of demand. You first buy mansions, luxury cars, various decorations, and all kinds of services. So, those related industries will be the first to benefit. When they get the new money, they will create a second wave of demand. They will continue to spend this money. Then there will be a third wave, a fourth wave, a fifth wave of demand. Slowly, it will create a multi-point diffusion effect until it spreads throughout the entire society. Because the total amount of goods in the market is fixed, the sudden increase in demand means there aren't enough goods to go around. Merchants will find their products are selling well, but they can't increase production in the short term. So, the merchants will raise prices. And thus, prices across all industries will rise. The cost of living goes up, but the speed at which this demand spreads is limited. It's not like the internet, where a trending topic is known by everyone instantly. It hides within our daily lives, spreading slowly with each person's economic activity, and it's also constrained by time. The end result is that our 100 billion has caused inflation. This money does not benefit society. Instead, it creates a redistribution of wealth that favors the first comers. The people who get the money first can spend the extra cash before prices have risen. This is equivalent to taking advantage of other people. And the people in remote mountain villages, and those who rely on fixed incomes like pensions and retirement funds, will feel the price hikes before their income has a chance to increase. The people who get the money first are taking advantage of the people who get it later. There's no morality in this process. Most people have no awareness of being stolen from or stealing. The conclusion of this little story is that in an inflationary society, those who are sacrificed are the ones who receive the new money last. Do you want to be one of the sacrificed? I'm guessing you don't. In the entire process of wealth flow during inflation, there is no morality, so there is no good or evil. There are only the consequences one must bear due to their knowledge, or lack thereof, of money. So, the next question is simple. How can we make money like the rich and stabilize our financial position? First, we need to see where this new money flows. As I mentioned earlier, our country massively increased the money supply in 2008, 2012, and 2015. Where did this money go? From this chart, we can see that most of the money went into infrastructure and credit, into the real economy. This strong stimulus also directly pushed up the stock and housing markets. In October 2008, the Shanghai Composite Index was at 1,664 points. 10 months later, it had doubled to 3,400 points. And what about Beijing's housing prices? After 2008, in just a few short months, Beijing's housing prices soared. They rose for a year, from 12,000 per square meter to 24,000. That is the power of money printing. This newly printed money flows into various industries, spreading out from multiple points in a matrix-like pattern. The people who are closest to the center get the biggest advantage. They get to eat the first slice of the pie that favors the first comers. Why are the rich able to get the first bite? Because the rich have assets. These assets could be shops, stocks, real estate, or options. These things are closely tied to the market. As soon as new money enters the market, they can keenly sense it and immediately raise their prices to capture the wealth. For ordinary people like us, we may not have the ability to create profitable corporate assets. So, the best way is to own shares in excellent companies. When the company makes money, you can benefit from the rise in stock price and sometimes even receive dividends. But buying stocks is very risky. Many people invest blindly. This problem can be solved. Let's keep going. The second point is entrepreneurship. When it comes to getting rich, you can never avoid entrepreneurship. The word entrepreneurship seems simple, but very few people know the real story behind it. I'm sort of a semi-entrepreneur myself, so let me share my own thoughts. It might sound a bit blunt. For ordinary people, entrepreneurship is mostly a daydream. Why do I say that? You have to look at the trigger for an ordinary person starting a business. They're tired of their job and want a different way of life. This kind of entrepreneurship is just donating money to decorators, utility companies, and landlords. That's not starting a business, that's doing charity. So, how can you increase your chances of success in entrepreneurship? It starts by immersing yourself deep within an industry, identifying an unmet need, and then seeking to compete through differentiation and building a moat around your business. The foundation of this process is that the entrepreneur must understand the industry better than most of the people working in it. Ideally, they should be able to support a team by themselves. That's right. It's not the employees supporting the boss, it's the boss supporting the employees. If you look at the startups that survive, you can count on your fingers. They are all led by bosses with outstanding personal business skills, who can single-handedly support a whole team. This is real entrepreneurship. Why are the founders of many great companies from sales or programming backgrounds? Because if you excel in these two fields, one person can be as productive as dozens. The average person's entrepreneurial dream is to find a storefront, hire a few people to help, and then lie at home collecting money. Anyone with this idea has paid a hefty price in tuition fees. Not only did they not make any money, but their personal finances took a huge step backward. So, for those of you who want to start a business, you can assess yourself. First, is this a real need? If it is, how will you differentiate to compete and avoid a low-price death spiral? Finally, if you do make money, how do you build a moat? How long can that moat hold back other competitors? Actually, the logic behind entrepreneurship is quite similar to analyzing stocks. Third point, become a resource allocator. In the market, we can divide working people into three levels: resource providers, resource allocators, and investors. Resource providers are ordinary people like us. We make money by selling our time and labor. Whether you're a laborer earning $1,000 a month or a top executive earning millions a year, you are a resource provider. Your price in the market is determined by the difficulty of your training and your irreplaceability. The higher your score, the higher your salary. A few years ago, many people said that food delivery drivers were making a lot of money, over $10,000 a month. In reality, that's hard-earned money, because riding an electric scooter and using a smartphone are things almost anyone can do. So, the ceiling for that job is already set. Over time, as the number of resource providers increases, the market supply and demand will balance out, and the salary for this profession will naturally return to an average line. As for whether an individual earns more or less, it all depends on their personal effort. Why are the salaries for programmers and high-level salespeople so high? Again, it's because the training takes a long time, there are too few high-end talents, and their irreplaceability is very strong. The income of a resource provider is destined to have a ceiling. If you want to break through that income limit, you must first accumulate resources and then become a person who allocates resources. Resources can be people, attention, or money. Accumulating resources is definitely hard work. Most people accumulate resources by selling their time and labor. Once you have resources in hand, there are many other ways to play the game. By integrating resources, you can raise your price, and then distribute compensation to the resource providers based on their labor. The resource allocator takes the biggest cut in the end. And the investor's game is even more advanced. Because investors have risen up from the first and second levels, they have the ability to identify skilled resource allocators. They vet businesses through various details and data, invest in those businesses, and reap huge returns. That's the investor's game. I haven't reached that level, so I won't go into too much detail. As for how to become the second or third type of person through hard work, you could say, in a very cliché way, that it's a result of hard work plus luck. I once read an article about the Up series of documentaries. This documentary series tracked children from different social classes and studied their class mobility throughout their lives. The results found that most people remained in the same social class as their parents. Only one child, who lived in a remote area, became a physics professor in the United States through his own efforts. Someone created a data model and adjusted the effort level of a portion of the people to be 1% higher than others. Later, through data calculation, out of the 10 people who worked harder, 9 of them ended up in the top 20 out of 200 data points. Many people envy the glamorous lives of the rich, but behind that glamour, there is undoubtedly more hardship. I know some rich people are lucky and gained their wealth through luck, but those are isolated cases. Individual cases cannot refute the overall trend. The vast majority of rich people became rich because they worked just a little bit harder than ordinary people. The final part, what should we do? It's simple. If you want to become someone, start by imitating them. To become rich, you first need to plug the leak in your wealth. Plugging the leak means converting your currency into money, thereby transferring the effects of inflation elsewhere. Buy assets that can preserve value and significantly outpace inflation. The most accessible options for ordinary people are bonds, stocks, and index funds. But investing in stocks can be problematic for the average person. For example, a relative of mine made $1 million by investing in stocks and bought a house in our provincial capital. But a few months later, he lost nearly $2 million. I asked him why. He said he heard a tip-off and invested most of his money, hoping to get rich in one go. I also have many friends who are doctors, and their stock market losses have them questioning their life choices. Very few of my relatives and friends who invest in stocks actually make money. I am the only exception. But the reason I can make money is that I put in the hard work to study value investing. If a good company isn't at a good price, I absolutely will not buy. That's why I never recommend individual stocks. Ordinary people don't have that much energy to read financial reports and do research. The difficulty of picking individual stocks is very high. Many bonds are also good. They have low risk, but the returns might not be enough to beat inflation. Actually, the most stable and safest investment for ordinary people is an index fund. An index fund is a type of stock fund that completely tracks a stock market index. Because the index has the ability to automatically select stocks, index funds have a kind of immortality. Unlike individual stocks, they are not susceptible to black swan events. If you master methods like dollar cost averaging or value averaging, it's not difficult to achieve an annual return of 10% or more by investing in index funds. Warren Buffett has recommended index funds to ordinary people on multiple occasions. However, I must say that investing in index funds requires multiple decisions, and you must invest for 3 to 5 years to capture the gains of a full market cycle. If you don't time your buying and selling opportunities well, you will definitely lose money. So if you don't have the relevant knowledge, it's best not to touch it at all. Due to the length of this video, I won't go into the methods and techniques of investing in index funds here. Once you've plugged the leak, the accumulation that follows can turn sand into a pagoda and drops of water into a river. Next, let's talk about the second thing, your income model. If your income model is still just collecting a salary once a month and having almost nothing left by the end of the month, this model will keep you from ever getting rich. In your income model, the more passive income, the better. If your passive income can cover your minimum expenses, then the midlife crisis that hits around age 30 will never happen to you. The passive income I'm talking about is income you can make even while you're sound asleep in bed. Let me ask you, do you have any passive income? If not, type a 1 in the comments. If you do, please share your monthly passive income in the comments. Passive income comes from assets. Many people don't know the difference between assets and liabilities. Simply put, assets are things that put money into your pocket, while liabilities are things that make you take money out of your pocket. For example, your car and the house you live in are liabilities because you need to pay for gas and mortgage payments. They are constantly making you spend money. But if you rent out your house and car, they become assets. They will make money for you. The rich person's income model is the key to how they became rich. In July of this year, I published an article on my public account studying the income models of the rich. A typical poor person's income model looks like this: get a job through education, get paid for the job, and use that pay to satisfy desires like a house or a car. Basically, most of their cash flows into other people's pockets. The rich person's income model looks like this: spend a lifetime of effort building businesses that generate cash flow. Then, buy real estate or stocks, funds, and other assets to make money generate more money. The rich divide their time into stages. In one stage, they build one cash flow generating asset. When one asset is successfully established, they free up their energy to build the next asset model. But the poor are content with a salary of a few thousand a month. This is the most fundamental difference. So let's talk about the third question: how to acquire assets that generate passive income. We can broadly classify assets now: houses, stocks, index funds, bonds, Bitcoin, shops, options. These are all acquired through the accumulation of wealth and resources. And assets that can generate cash flow, like companies, books, copyrights, websites, patents, these are built up slowly through the accumulation of wisdom and vision. This kind of passive income requires specialized learning and investment. So, it's simple. If you want to have financial resources, there's only one way: accumulate them drop by drop. But many people accumulate very slowly because, as resource providers, their training costs and irreplaceability are too low. They can't command a high price. At this point, what you need most is not to work harder, but to use the time you have left after work. Spend the financial resources you have and enroll in courses for yourself to learn higher level skills. This will, in turn, increase the speed at which you accumulate financial resources. You can't always think of money as just money. You have to see it as a measure of resources. When you are at your youngest, you must invest your good resources in yourself to achieve growth. Honestly, 50% of people can't even do this one thing, because learning, changing jobs, and going through a series of interviews is a painful process. But in life, if you don't do things that make you uncomfortable, you'll have regrets when you're old. I hope this video can bring you tangible growth and help. Only by switching your job to one that is harder to train for can you get a high salary. With a high salary, you can successfully accumulate financial resources. Then, dig deep, find a need, and solve that need. This whole process is very troublesome. It requires investing financial, material, and mental resources. It requires delaying gratification for a long time to achieve. This is the price of wanting to become rich. As for wisdom and vision resources, they require constantly solving problems and reading books. Neither can be dispensed with. Solving problems is about practice and consolidating knowledge. Reading books is about expanding the breadth and depth of your knowledge. Only through day after day of continuous learning, turning effort into your very flesh and blood, can you welcome your own moment of glory? And only then can you achieve the goal of having passive income while you sleep. Sushir once said, "Those who accomplished great deeds in ancient times not only had transcendent talent but also possessed an iron will of perseverance." Since ancient times, those who could achieve great things not only needed extraordinary talent but also an unyielding will. Many brilliant people started in industries that nobody was optimistic about. For example, Kazuo Inamori, author of Ikigai, when he first started working, went to a ceramics factory that couldn't even pay its wages. 4 university graduates went in total. The other 3 left because there was no salary. He, because he thought about it day and night, had a strong conviction, and finally created a precision ceramic material used in television transistors. He then founded his own company. At 51, he founded another company. Both companies made it to the Fortune 500 list. What we need to learn is that spirit of persistence. Also, young people have no need to be anxious. Why? Because most people think the world should develop linearly. For example, if you put in 10 units of effort, you should get 10 units of return. In reality, society develops exponentially. When you first start, you might put in 10 units of effort and get nothing in return. And the more you invest, the less you seem to get. Behind every success, there is always a dark period. But as long as you persevere, you will eventually hit that bottleneck and break through it. Then you will discover that you might earn more money in one day than you did in the previous year. Many people around me, including myself, have this problem of being too eager for quick success. I'm saying all this to remind you, and also to remind myself, to persist. Persist just a little bit longer. I always believe that as long as you work hard and persevere, you will definitely get what you want. And those of you who can spend this much time watching this video are definitely people who can delay gratification. For those who have watched up to this point, feel free to post your goals for the next few years. As long as you think about it day and night, and are mindful of this goal every day, you will eventually achieve it. No matter what, I want to say to you, keep going. Persevere. You will definitely reach your turning point and get what you want. Finally, thank you all for watching.